Times change. The marketing landscape changes. One thing that's been solid as a rock for decades is email. When you use high-quality email and site funnels to convert high-intent traffic that is not currently in your ads funnel, you increase your domain revenue without increasing your ad expense. You improve your marketing expense ratios, and you unlock money to reinvest in your business or put in your pocket. The cheapest customer is the customer you already have. So if you want help with this, come to pilothouse.co, fill out the lead form, and ask to speak with me directly. Have fun spamming.
In the inbox late night, glowing screen, see the light. Email, everything feels alright.
How to attribute your post-click ecosystem, and by extension, how to attribute your entire digital ecosystem to get an idea for how these channels are doing and with a mind towards email, SMS, CRO, and where the opportunities are. Most people at large successful e-commerce companies are using multi-touch attribution software. Multi-touch attribution systems were invented by advertisers. They had to figure out, okay, which advertising channels are driving the most results so I can invest in those. Here's a couple things that you just won't get out of an MTA. Some clear wins that will never show up. It's the world's best email and retention podcast, and I'm your host, Jordan Gordon. We are a member of the DTC network of podcasts and the philosophical home of the Pilot House email and customer retention team. If you want to make the sweet nectar of low-cost revenue a large part of your digital ecosystem, then follow us on your favorite podcast app today. This time, we will discuss how to attribute your post-click ecosystem, and by extension, how to attribute your entire digital ecosystem. And this episode is especially geared towards someone who, at the end of the year, looks at their advertising bill and says, "Holy Hannah, this is costing me a fortune." If that's what you're thinking when you look at your advertising bill, it could be that you're not driving enough low-cost revenue, right? And we're going to talk about how some attribution systems obfuscate some realities of digital marketing. This falls in with a whole bunch of really, really foundational episodes that we're launching right now. And some of these might have launched already when you watch this episode, or some might launch in a couple episodes. It's just a whole bunch. I've been like rage recording a bunch of episodes. So Site Funnels, episode 1, Site Funnels, episode 2. We talked about DeVault. We go into their tools and we talk about their emails and website through the lens of Site Funnels 1 and Site Funnels episode 2. And a financial case for CRO, which is a companion for long ago. We did an episode, The Financial Case for Email. And these show you, like the financial case episodes show you, okay, what happens when you pump email or CRO versus when you pump advertising. And this one will show you how to attribute all these channels together to get an idea for how these channels are doing and with a mind towards email, SMS, CRO, and where the opportunities are. Okay. So there's a whole bunch of episodes, and I'd recommend you listen to a bunch of the episodes that are coming out right now. I did promise an attribution episode, like right in the very beginning of the pod. It took me a year to get there. A couple times I was like, "Oh yeah, this is kind of like an attribution episode, right? We'll call this one, but this one's actually it, right?" So this has got a lot of really important stuff. I want to jump into this with an example from our own customer base. Yeah, I give you lots of examples of us nailing it. I've got a team of 35, right? And we represent all kinds of brands, all kinds of sizes, all kinds of verticals. But here, this case, it's actually, in a way, not a win for us, but it really does show the importance of email retention. So we had a brand that was with all kinds of Pilot House channels, advertising plus email and retention. They asked us to launch some stuff that was like kind of just go beyond our normal service. Our service is made to get you from like here to here. There's obviously a video if you're listening in a car, from here to here, fast. and just drive a whole bunch of cheap revenue, and just, kind of pump your domain. That's what we're doing. Very focused. Anyway, whatever. They wanted us to launch some additional stuff, and we just didn't nail it. But their account, like the core service, their email and retention was like primed, right? And so what happened? Well, this Black Friday this year, because they were with us for a long time overall, Pilot House, and they're still with Pilot House Advertising, the e-com strategists came and said, yeah, their repeat buyers are down 50% year over year. And look, in a way, it's great to have this chance to discover how much we're nailing it, but also, wow, I wish they had twice as many repeat buyers this year. Now, the point of this is, wow, many people don't find out how important email and retention are until they're suddenly absent, right? Working on the kind of Black Friday inboxing for a very large e-commerce brand this year, consulting with them, and their CEO said, yeah, I know what it looks like. He's not super technical, but he's like, I know what it looks like when your email system works. You send an email and you have a good day. And right now we send an email and we're having the same day, right? Those good days are important. Those good days, those are the extra money that you invest in advertising to grow your business. So, and you know what, the e-com strategist is going to talk to them and say, hey, let's give this another go. You can see the value of Pilot House email retention. And we're going to obviously have another go at launching the additional stuff they wanted launched. Ultimately, since their repeat buyers were down 50% year over year, the e-commerce strategist said, yeah, and the result of that was we would spend to grow them, but every time we would do this big push in spending, we would hit our ROAS limits, right? Like your ROAS or your MER, your marketing expense ratio, basically like how much you have to spend to drive revenue. You can only spend so much, right? As a share of your revenue. And so they'd push, to get a wider audience, and they'd hit their caps and they couldn't scale. He said, we couldn't scale like we could before. Listen to this. They could not scale their advertising like they could before because email and retention was no longer working for them. Email and retention is what drives your advertising, right? And I've been saying this, and now because of this minor tragedy with this client, I can tell you, here it is. I'm telling you right now. It just totally slowed down their entire marketing engine and growing their whole business because email and retention was no longer working because they went to an inferior agency. Now that we've had the chance to discuss a live case of how important email and retention is, right? And how it drives your business forward. Let's talk about attribution models, because what we're going to discuss in this episode is how to attribute all the channels you see on this visual. There is a visual, by the way, on this episode. It's not important if you're driving. It's not important that you check out this visual. If your car drives itself, you can maybe open it up on your laptop, whatever. But this episode will talk about how to evaluate all these, and specifically in another way than most people are, in a complementary way. So most people at large, successful e-commerce companies and small companies that are smart and want to be large, they're using multi-touch attribution software like Triple Whale or something like that. Even Google Analytics is MTA. There's even some light MTA functionality within Shopify. If you don't know what multi-touch attribution is, just Google it. But essentially, to really, really sum it up, let's say people go through 4 different marketing channels and then make a purchase. Which channel gets the credit? Well, you could say last click. Well, that makes your bottom of funnel look awesome and you'd never invest in advertising and then you can't grow your business. You can go first touch, the first channel that the buyer used. That makes advertising look awesome. You don't invest in email retention. You can't scale because your marketing ratios suck, like we just discussed. Lots of systems have even, where everyone gets a fair share, right? But even that, which is not bad, it's like everyone gets fair share. It hides so much nuance. There's so much nuance in understanding how marketing channels work. So let me just give you 2. I have 2 examples here of how MTAs obscure truths in your digital ecosystem. And why do they do this? It's not malicious. It's just the nature of what they are. Okay. Multi-touch attribution systems were invented by advertisers who were saying to themselves, oh, holy Hannah, this is costing me a fortune, like we were just discussing. And they had to figure out, okay, which advertising channels are driving the most results so I can invest in those. That's what this software was invented for. So first of all, since it's like made by advertisers for advertisers, in the end, any multi-touch attribution system is going to say, hey, advertising's awesome, you should do more. Like, none of them are not going to say that, right? So you got to understand, that's just the incentive, because it's by advertisers for advertisers, right? And here's a couple things that you just won't get out of an MTA. Some clear wins that will never show up. What happens if you double your conversion rate? Which channel gets credit for that? Let's say you've got a CRO team and they nail it. They double your conversion rate. Well, there's not a CRO channel. It's just going to look like all your channels did better. What if you build an email system that draws people back after 3 years and gets them back in your digital ecosystem? Gets them to open, okay, they're in campaigns, and then they click, and then, oh, they clicked, so they end up in your Facebook retargeting, right? And then they buy. Where's that going to show up? Where is the fact that you are converting addresses from 3 years ago rather than addresses that are 3 weeks old, right? When you reconvert a 3-year-old address versus a 3-week-old address, that is a win, because a 3-week-old address is currently in your advertising ecosystem. You're currently paying for that address. Email is just chasing the same dollar, right? When you pull back someone from 3 years ago, they are likely not in your advertising ecosystem. They have pieced out, right? Most addresses after 3 years have pieced out. That's just the way the business works, right? So when you pull one of them back, they haven't engaged in, and I'm not just saying 3 years old, I'm saying haven't engaged in 3 years. When you pull those out back, and by the way, we have ways that do that. If you're interested in doing that, you can come to pilothouse.co, fill out the lead form, and I'll speak to you directly. But when you do that, there's a couple important points. One, when you do that successfully, it actually makes your email metrics look worse, because you can always get easy clicks and great click-through rates messaging people who just went through your ads funnel and are super stoked because they saw the awesome POV videos that were going on inside your ads platform, right? When you go and get that address from 3 years ago, that's a hard address to get. Makes your email metrics look worse, right? So also, it doesn't look any better in the MTA. In fact, when you're chasing the same dollar and getting those easy clicks, you get the clicks, and the clicks get the attribution, and it makes your channel look better, right? You're just chasing the same dollar, getting easy clicks, right? But you are not improving your MER or your ROAS, right? You're not. You're not driving business that is not currently in the ads ecosystem. So you're not like pushing up the domain revenue without pushing up the advertising revenue, improving your marketing ratios. You're just sailing in the same wind as what's happening in advertising, right? So let's say you do that right. You do what email retention is supposed to do, the promise of customer retention, right? Bringing back those customers, getting them to buy again, and bringing back, not just getting them to buy again, but getting them to buy again when they're way outside of your digital ecosystem. Where does that show up in your MTA? It doesn't really. So if you're doing it right, likely things look worse for that channel, for email, if you're doing it right in the MTA. So how about that, right? How about that to really steel yourself and think, whoa, holy, am I thinking about these channels right? Where when I'm killing it, it's going to look like I'm shooting myself in the foot. And when I'm shooting myself in the foot, it's going to look like I'm killing it. And I see this stuff all the time. This is the natural state of things, because people use the MTA as the source of truth. Now, do I think we shouldn't have MTAs? No, of course not. MTAs are critical. I don't know any. I've never worked at a successful e-commerce business that's not doing this. Of course you have to do it. But, to really get into the crux, we're going to start talking about these metrics soon. To really get into it and really understand your ecosystem, you need to use multiple models to look at the ecosystem. Right? What do we know? We know that all models are wrong and some models are useful. So I just told you how MTAs, 2 great examples of how MTAs can be wrong, but they're right in a lot of ways too, because you know what? You add all the revenue up and it equals the Shopify revenue. That's pretty useful. So at least you know that you're not double counting. Even if you're wrong counting a bit, it's like you're not double counting. So I want to talk to you about an overlapping attribution model. And I do this I don't do this a lot. I run this for H2 once a year. And I'm just going to come out and tell you guys, I was nervous about coming. I mean, I've done lots of attribution talks, but I was nervous about just giving the whole model on the podcast. I mean, really early on when I launched the pod, I was like, oh, I'm worried we're going to lose our edge. But the fact is, 4 years in, I'm still, every single time I do an audit from some other agency, they're still doing it wrong. So I'm just not worried. It hasn't happened yet, right? We still have our edge. Anyway, it's a second model that you can use to confirm what you see in your MTA, to weigh against what you see in your MTA, and give you another view of how all these channels are working. Okay? First of all, let's just talk about how many numbers, how many metrics there are in here. Okay? So you see, we have the ecosystem. Here's the diagram. Okay? At the top is ecosystem. The bottom is customer retention. Ecosystem is the digital ecosystem. Customer retention is customer metrics. And of course, customer metrics are all channel. So they're technically like outside of the digital ecosystem. It's like more of a source of record of what actually happened. It's the repository of what happened as a result of your digital ecosystem. So we got ecosystem on top, customer retention on bottom. And within ecosystem, we have at the very top, advertising and organic, right? And then we have email and SMS, and below that CRO. So advertising and organic, we call that platforms. You got your Meta, your Google, your TikTok. Email and SMS, that is like outbound post-click. And then CRO, that's like website. That's like inbound post-click, right? And so I'll just tell you, first of all, just a count of metrics so you understand the number of numbers we're going to be talking about here. In domain, we've got 2 metrics. Under advertising, 2 metrics. Under organic, 1 metric. Under email and SMS, 3 metrics. Under CRO, 4 metrics. And under retention, 2 metrics. 14 metrics, okay, that we are going to put together to measure the size, or basically importance and efficiency of each of these channels, to measure their relative impact on your business. And again, this is overlapping. So when you take all the revenue that you would calculate with this, it's going to equal more than Shopify. And so they're just allowed to overlap. And what's the importance of that vis-a-vis the MTA? Well, I just told you a couple of simple ways, like things that are just nowhere near what's happening in an MTA. And what's the MTA doing? It's taking things and it's sharing it. It's saying, hey, we're going to take this and we're going to split it and give some here and some here. In the overlapping, we're not doing that. So if one channel got totally kneecapped by the MTA by having its importance shared out kind of maybe too much, let's just say, right? If too much of its importance was given out to other channels, in the overlapping model, you would not see that. You would see the entire kind of revenue, revenue basically, or impact of that channel. Okay? So that's why you would use an overlapping model like this to run next to your multi-touch attribution. Oh, this is such a killer episode. Oh, I hope, you know what, guys, you might have to listen to this one twice, but man, you can use this. You can use this to really see the importance of email and retention and CRO. So we'll just run through these in order, okay? First of all, under ecosystem, there's just Shopify revenue and the domain ads MER. The MER is the marketing expense ratio. You heard me say that a lot, and it's simply marketing spend or advertising spend divided by revenue. That's the MER. It's like the inverse. It's like the inverse of ROAS. Okay, so it's just spend efficiency. A higher MER is less effective. A lower MER is more effective. And if you want to do this with ROAS, you can figure out how to do it. You just divide it. Just do the inverse division. So ecosystem has Shopify revenue and the ad spend MER of that Shopify revenue, meaning for every $1 of Shopify, how many cents did you spend on advertising, right? Yeah, numbers like 20 and 25 are pretty common there. It does not include things, this does not include retainers for agencies or whatever. This is just spend efficiency, okay? Now, under advertising, And organic, I want you to calculate, actually throughout all this, for platform revenue. So that's the Shopify revenue. Now we're going to talk about platform revenue, okay? And for the platform revenue, we're going for advertising, organic, Klaviyo, email, SMS. We're going to use a 7-day click, okay? So it's 7-day click platform. And organic, we're not getting a platform we're going to use, but we can go to our MTA and we can do a 7-day click for that channel in there. Or just, you know what, I mean, for organic, you can just go to your MTA and pull the organic revenue. This is not really an organic analysis. This is for email, SMS, CRO. So you can actually just use your judgment on how to go in there and pull organic revenue. It's not the focus of this, but I did have it in here because like this would look weird if there was no organic in it. It's like, well, check out your ecosystem and where's organic. So just take some revenue that is closest to 7-day click. Okay, so for advertising, you know, you go to all your advertising channels, okay? And you pull the 7-day last click revenue. So your two metrics in here are advertising to Shopify revenue rate. So you take your advertising revenue, which is all of it, right? And of course, there's massive overlap here. This stuff's allowed to overlap, okay? So you take your advertising 7-day last click platform revenue, divide it by your Shopify revenue, and you get an advertising to Shopify revenue rate, which might be like 60 or 70%. And it's okay. It's okay if it's this huge number because all these things are allowed to overlap. And then you take total ad spend, divide it by that 7-day last click revenue, and you get the MER. And so our two metrics are advertising to Shopify revenue rate and advertising revenue MER. And you're going to see these two metrics repeated because here's the system. What do we see there? We see how big is advertising platform as a share of Shopify? Okay. So how much impact does the platform say it has on a 7-day last click? And when we use a 7-day last click everywhere, it's very fair. And then you say, okay, that's the impact, right? The relative impact. Well, what's the relative efficiency? The MER. So we have our ads platform and we're putting all our advertising together, which because this is mostly an analysis for email, SMS, and CRO. So it's okay to put our advertising platform all together in one bucket because we're trying to really get good insight into email and CRO here, right? Again, I do this once a year. I do a 6-month window, by the way. Why do I do H2? Why do I do H2? Because look, it takes 6 months to, run all of your reactivation, fatten up your campaign window, send a bunch of Black Friday, right? All this stuff like fixing email takes 6 months. We always do 6-month contracts because that's how long it takes. Yeah. So I run this like once a year. It's a fairly big lift. If you, of course, at home want to do this separately for each of your advertising channels, you totally can, of course. You just take that platform revenue on a 7-day last click, you divide it by Shopify. You've got your platform to Shopify revenue rate. And then you take your ad spend for that platform and you divide it by that 7-day last click, and you've got that platform's MER. The platform revenue rate, the platform MER. How big is that platform as a share of Shopify? And what is the spend efficiency of that platform? 2 metrics. So we did 2 domain metrics, Shopify revenue and domain ads MER, which is the total ad spend divided by Shopify revenue. And then advertising, Shopify revenue rate, the size of platform advertising as a share of Shopify, the impact, and the MER of that revenue, all measured in a 7-day last click. Okay, for organic, again, I'm not concerned about how you derive your organic revenue, and maybe you just go to an MTA and pull that, right? You're not going to get a platform revenue for that. But basically just take the organic, divide that by Shopify as well, and you're going to get an organic to Shopify revenue rate. Okay? 1 metric, which is, okay, what's the impact of organic as a share of Shopify, right? And that's just going to be there for you for reference as you look at these other channels, because we're looking at whether we should be spending on email, CRO versus advertising. Okay. If you do pull it straight from an MTA, it's going to make it look smaller than the other ones, which are pulling from platform 7-day last click. But you know what? You should be, if you're doing this at home and you've only got one brand to do this on, like I do this once a year because I've got like a bunch of brands I got to do it on, and it's all about efficiency. But if you're doing this at home, well, you want to do this more often, like at least twice a year for sure, right? I wouldn't say more than once a quarter, but then you can at least trend that organic. Is it getting better? Is it getting worse over time? Okay. Now let's get to where it's really important. So we've got the domain, and we know domain revenue and spend efficiency. And we got the same thing for ads, ad revenue, spend efficiency. Now let's look at email. So you can go into Klaviyo, and this is obviously you can do this with more than just Klaviyo, but we're talking about Klaviyo because most of our clients are using Klaviyo, and Klaviyo is kind of the industry standard in DTC. But you can go in there and you can just run a month of revenue on a 7-day last click. And you don't have to change your attribution model. You can just run it, in the attribution area. You can go in there and just run 7-day last click. So just go run 7-day last click, remove the bot clicks. And with that 7-day last click email revenue, you do the same thing we just did. You divide that 7-day last click email revenue by your Shopify domain revenue, and you get the Klaviyo Shopify revenue rate. What is the impact of Klaviyo platform revenue as a share of Shopify in the same 7-day last click that I gave to my advertising channels? And then, same as before, you divide your spend, and Klaviyo does have spend. I mean, for shorthand, I often just plug in, like, if it's a mid-sized client, I plug in $5,000. It's just Klaviyo spend, right? But you can go in and you can look and you can find your obviously your monthly Klaviyo spend. There's no ad spend, so that's your only cost. We don't, by the way, I've never seen at the marketing metrics level staff comp included in there. So it's just the platform costs. So you plug in your Klaviyo cost, which, certainly I was running the numbers for a brand that does like 14 million in ad spend per year, and they're spending like, whatever, $7,500 a month on Klaviyo, like nothing, right? So you plug that in and you're going to get your Klaviyo MER for that 7-day last click revenue. And it's going to be tiny. Now, this is what you're going to see. You're going to see the ads. Let's say you run your ads. Well, actually, let's just say, forget your ads channel. Just look at domain MER. Your domain MER, which is ad spend divided by Shopify revenue, is going to be, I don't know. I mean, it's different from business to business, but like 20 to 30%, if it's a brand that's aggressively scaling, even more, right? I mean, if you are financed, if you've got VC financing and you're trying to grow fast, I mean, this is how things were when I was coming up. I mean, now we're entering an age where you need to grow from your own profit and spend from your own free cash flow. Of course, there is still VC going on. So let's say you're financed. Your domain MER might be 100%. You might be spending 100% of your revenue on advertising because you're trying to grow fast. You're trying to build awareness fast because you got to have a business plan. You got to be so big in 5 years. But let's just say, like, a lot of what we see is brands that are growing from their own profit, spending from their free cash flow. Yeah, that number might be 20, 30% for the ecosystem domain ad spend MER. Well, that 7-day last click email MER, 7-day last click platform email MER, might be like 1 to 3%. Like, it's going to be like nothing. It's going to be so small. And just looking at that, if you just got to that point so far, this is like halfway down my list of metrics. Just looking at that, you're going to go, oh, I get it. I have to spend, like, for every dollar I spend on advertising to drive revenue on a 7-day last click, I only have to spend 10 cents to drive that same dollar of revenue through email on 7-day last click. And that's going to you're going to look at the spreadsheet and go, oh, I get it. Okay, I want to have as much as that as I can possibly get, right? And then, so that's the two, and those two are common through this whole thing. What is your platform to Shopify revenue rate? What's the impact of that channel as a share of Shopify on a 7-day last click platform? And what is the MER, the marketing expense ratio? What is the spend efficiency of that? Okay, there's a third metric on the email and SMS here, which is percent of revenue that comes from repeat buyers. And of course, that is a metric that's very hard to get in Klaviyo, right? Klaviyo only gives you email metrics. We love Klaviyo. I'll tell you right now, like Klaviyo is not perfect, but I've used, I don't know, a dozen or so senders in my career, and I was on the brand side. So like I've really used those senders. I've like been a power user on all these senders. And I'll tell you how it is out there in the sender world. There's a handful that are really good. And then there is like an ocean of garbage. Just, companies that are like, hey, let's just put up a sender ourselves. And they've got some idea, or the sender that does this really good. And it's like some value proposition on their website. And then you use it and you're like, yeah, but it's horrible. Okay. Yeah, you do this thing, but everything else sucks so much, right? That it actually drags us down and makes us less effective. So bottom line, we love Klaviyo. It just gets the job done. But I mean, what a miss that you can't go in there and just say what percent of my revenue is from buyers, right? What percent of my revenue is repeat buyer revenue? So you got to calculate this yourself. If you have been listening to the world's best email retention podcast for the last year and a bit, then you will know one of the first things you do is go to your segments and split them by prospect and buyer. You just take your engagement segment that you send to every day, clone it. On one of them, you say has purchased 0 times overall time. On one, you say has purchased 1 or more times overall time. It's that simple. And then send to both of those segments when you send one campaign, send the campaign to both of those segments. And what's going to happen is in all of your segment reporting, you're going to get all of your revenue broken down by whether it was prospect or buyer. Okay, that's the first step. So if you've been listening to the world's best email retention podcast for the last year and you haven't yet done that to your segments, shame on you. Shame on you. If you have, and you've been good about making sure that the segmentation you're using is always split up by prospect and buyer, then you can go to campaign reporting, do your campaign reports by segment. Don't split it up by campaign, split it up by segment. It'll just give you only the segments. And then you get your prospect and your buyer revenue all in one. Okay. And then you can pull out the buyer revenue and you know what portion of your campaign revenue is from buyers. And then when it comes to flows, this is quite simple. Any flow that triggers off of subscribe, like the welcome flow, you call revenue from that flow, you call prospect revenue. And any flow that triggers off of a purchase, like post-purchase, reactivation, that revenue you call buyer revenue because it's repeat buyer, it's repeat revenue because they've bought before, right? And then what I recommend, the simplest thing to do, you can, of course, you can split your entire funnel support up by buyer and prospect. And if you're just on the brand side and you want to understand your business really well and you have the extra, you can deal with the technical debt because you're just managing one brand. It's actually kind of interesting to split your site, browse, cart, checkout, abandon flows by buyer and prospect. But again, I'm running this thing on a dozen or so, between 1 and 2 dozen brands, right? And so this thing has to be efficient. So I personally just take the funnel support and I say, look, funnel support works on prospect and buyers. I make the assumption that it's an equal split and I just ignore it. And so then I've got my campaign revenue split up by prospect buyer. I've got my flow revenue split up by prospect buyer, put them together. And I say, what percent of the revenue in Klaviyo is repeat revenue, right? It's revenue from someone who's already bought in past. And I'll tell you, it's like between 60 and 70% is what it usually is. That's where it usually lands. So it's easy to say that approximately 2/3 that we see, 2/3 of the revenue in Klaviyo is repeat revenue. And there's an episode I recently did. Again, I think you'll see it. I think it'll be released before this one, where I break that down and I just show you share of Shopify revenue by recent stale prospect buyer, the 4 quadrants, and I show you where campaign revenue comes in from those 4 quadrants. So you can go find that episode and you can get a much more in-depth understanding of that. But for now, I just explained to you how to do it. Go and find out what percent of the revenue is from repeat. And this is important because, again, generally speaking, repeat revenue is not in your ad system. Some people just flat out exclude buyers from their advertising through the advertising platform, pull a list out of Klaviyo or whatever, or use some exclusions if there's a good Klaviyo integration, which there almost always is. And some people do allow buyers in there, but it's controlled. For 30 days after purchase, they're in a really controlled repeat purchase flow and then they're kicked out, and you just manage that repeat purchase campaign in the advertising channel to make sure that your spend efficiency is quite strong. If you've got a strong spend efficiency in there, like if it's, 2 or 3 times better than your general spend efficiency, it's making your overall MER better. And as long as if your profit goes up, you can spend more. If you're not on an absolute fixed budget, you would do that, improve your ratios, and then unlock more spend. But generally speaking, when you reactivate a buyer, they're not in your ads funnel. So this is how we know when we see 2/3 of the revenue coming out of Klaviyo is repeat buyer revenue. And we know that the 7-day platform MER, the marketing expense ratio for that, is like 2% versus 20 for domain ads MER, maybe 30 for domain ads MER. That's how we know that Klaviyo is like rocket fuel for your business. And that's why if suddenly you're not using Klaviyo right because you switched agencies at the wrong time or something like that, that's how we know that when suddenly boom, the whole thing slows down. It's like, yeah, you pulled out this revenue that had like a 2% MER, right? And like 2/3 of that was to existing business that you're not pushing through your ads funnel, right? It's clear as day. Hey, entrepreneurs, executives, spammers, and webmasters. This episode ended up being literally 1.5 hours discussing how to attribute an entire digital ecosystem in a way that is complementary to your multi-touch attribution system like Triple Whale or even Google Analytics, whatever you're using. At 1.5 hours, obviously we're going to split this in 2, so we'll do part 2. Super important for you to understand this episode, to understand where all the pieces of the persistent revenue ecosystem fit together and how you size and optimize them. So, hey, why don't you give us a positive review and a thumbs up wherever that you do that in your own podcast system, and subscribe, of course, and tell your friends, and have fun spamming.
In the inbox late night, glowing screens see the light. Email, everything feels alright.
Hey, entrepreneurs and spammers. Remember, you can't scale without email, and the cheapest customer to acquire is the customer you already have. So please subscribe to the world's best email and retention podcast and learn how to make low-cost revenue a big part of your digital ecosystem.